Being a dwarf sucks. Controversial opinion? Maybe. Why have I come to that conclusion? It's simple, really. Being 45 years old, and still only being considered barely an adult sucked. Being able to subconsciously recreate the exact emotional response I felt on a particular day, decades after the fact when I am so easily susceptible to embarrassment in both of my lives, makes it easy to understand why some of my people go stark raving mad, shave their heads and try to find a way to die that's acceptable in the eyes of society. The stifling and oftentimes rigid social hierarchy that came with living in the relative safety of a carack. By my ancestors, because you try not assimilating after being born into and living for 4+ decades in and among a new culture, it's a pain in my arse. Having my life and standing greatly determined by the actions of people I never personally knew, whose legacy is a near unchallenged railroad upon my own future, denying or at least the very least stifling any personal agency I had unless I managed to outstubborn people famous for their stubbornness. Sucks. It really, really, really sucks. Are there good parts? Sure, I guess. I like my cousins. I like some of my more wacky elders, and my siblings aren't terrible to me. A rare perk of living in a place that values blood ties so highly by almost everyone involved instead of the semi-hypocritical version I experienced in my first life, I suppose. I'm not sure how badly I'd have fared if I didn't grow up in a collectivist, group-oriented culture in my last life, but it made things, if not bearable, then familiar enough to cope. Still didn't solve the issue that I didn't really find my father nor my mother's professions, warrior and warrior-turned-housewife, all that appealing, though. To me, if I ever got close enough to a goblin or orc that I was in fist-swinging range, that meant things had gone very, very wrong. You'd think I became an engineer with that mindset, but alas, my luck in skills and math beyond a high school level and abysmal understanding of applied physics once again screwed me over. Nope, to the dismay of kith and kin, I, like my uncle, was a ranger. Hold on a moment, you think. Doesn't that fly in the face of the whole minimize instances of gobbo in the face criteria I just mentioned? Is being a ranger not a thankless, socially stigmatized, and dangerous job, where I am constantly outside the safe confines of the carack and under a treacherous open sky? Yes, but you misunderstand something, O fictitious being I speak to from across the void of reality. Mining is dusty and caves without gold filigree, frowning dwarf statues, and the familiar scent of beard oil are terror-filled abysses from which any manner of monsters can come crawling out to eat you, torture you, kill you, and or any combination of torture, kill, or eat you can befall your person. Smithing didn't remove the possibility of being drafted as a warrior. It just meant that I would spend most of my life in uncomfortably hot rooms and getting burned because my clumsy ass misjudged the temperature of a freshly forged tool or something. Like I said, I'm not smart or attentive enough to be an engineer, and I definitely don't have the blood prerequisite to be a runesmith. Just a whole lot of alcohol and race-wide depression. So, you gotta make do. So, because I totally believe it's the smartest option available to me, and not because I've rationalized my depression in my head, I chose to be a ranger. Rangers, after all, are the closest you'll get to a reasonable dwarf. How so? Because rangers are quirky by dwarf standards, and a quirky dwarf is a dwarf that doesn't care about grudges, honor, and glory as tightly, or in the same way as regular dwarfs do. They are the ones who do not balk at trapping, poisoning, and generally killing your enemies in what is considered ignoble and underhanded ways that, if things don't go belly up, keep them unnoticed and out of harm's way most of the time. Of course, there are downsides. Living out in the open, hostile environment of the World's Edge Mountains with a danger around every corner and proximity to gobbles and all that. But, like I said, I'm not smart or well-connected enough to do the safe options I preferred. That's what I tell myself, at least. I take a seat near the corner of the hall, nursing a mug of alcohol between my hands and generally being an antisocial gloomy Gus in a room full of uncharacteristically quiet dwarfs of Clan Growlish. Normally, I do my best to keep clear of my family, which makes me being here, and the clan hall full to bursting with dwarfs attentively listening to our patriarch, Thane Grimbrew, and the assembled elder council step up and begin speaking, all the more confusing. Now, don't get it twisted. My distance isn't because I hate them, well, mostly, but because it saves me and them a lot of hassle. I haven't actually read a Zanzia or Rusia novel, but I imagine that the social etiquette is comparable. Now, we aren't going around using titles and flowery language. I don't want you to think that dwarfs aren't as straightforward and blunt as depicted. However, there is an unspoken code of conduct everywhere one goes in a Karak. The people you associate with reflect back on you. The social strata between two parties determine the kind of way you can be blunt and direct with them. Deference and saving face are paramount for the lesser and higher respectively. Dwarves aren't as kill-happy, I think, but if you aren't smart, then a simple insult can spiral into something much uglier. Now, I'm not going around running my mouth and getting up to mischief, but being a ranger generally makes strangers stare distrustfully at anyone who associates with me that isn't also a ranger, a group that coincidentally is predominantly composed of my family. Those looks only grow more confused when they notice the emblem of Cran Growlish on my cloak, as their heads try to conceive of the idea of a son of the reputable, bold, and legendary Cran Growlish, who many say are the dwarfiest dwarfs to ever walk the Karaz Angkor, mostly Cran Growlish, being a ranger. Now, my family wouldn't throw me to the curb or disown me because of that. No, really, I do mean that. They will and have gone to bat for me multiple times because, in a refreshing turn of events, the usually toxic and one-sided familial loyalty I derided in my first life actually went both ways when it came to dwarfs, or at least to Clan Growlish. So, as recompense, and let me tell you, feeling like you owe someone is a very real and visceral thing as a dwarf, cultural imprinting notwithstanding. So, I chose to do my best to not create situations that may mean kinsmen had to put their money where their mouths were and start throwing punches when people start saying their weird cousin is a disreputable sort. So, I was a bit of a black sheep by choice, and because I still did get a few confused grumbles and occasional offers for warrior training from my relatives, but that suited me fine. Am I traumatized, coping, biologically inclined and further culturally reinforced towards such behavior? Or maybe my standards for a functional family unit are simply that low. Right, back to the point. Why my reclusive behind was here and not out in the mountains or some quiet corner like usual. Well, the simple fact is that the clan elders lit the proverbial bonfires and called everyone, and I do mean everyone, to a meeting over a very pressing and important topic about the clan future. Nobility, with a capital letter and kitchen sink too. For the unaware, dwarf clans are part of a paradoxically direct but intricate and convoluted mess of hierarchies, as the individuals who make them up, and like that hierarchy, their place is determined by a mix of age, reputation, honor, wealth, and merit. The very bottom were the outcasts, the clans that had shamed themselves and were banished. Above them are the wanderer clans, refugees and migrants from overrun holds who could either be eking out a living outside or had found a new hold to take them in. And then you have the mass of settled clans who had been in their hold from the very beginning or were founded there. There's a lot of wiggle room and jockeying going on in that one. But the truth is that no matter your achievements, there is one true glass ceiling in this hierarchy, and that's nobility. A lot like humans, really, except with more meticulous record-keeping. Point was, unless you could directly trace lineage from one of the ancestor gods, your clan wasn't noble, and the nobles didn't tend to marry down unless the other party was either incredibly rich, incredibly valorous, and or incredibly skilled. How did that matter now? Well, according to our clan elders, we were being considered for a potential marital contract with the noble clans of Karaz Karak through a marriage with one of High King Alric's distant nieces. However, we weren't the only clan in contention for such a reward, and while High King Ulrich held us in high esteem, there were yet some naysayers among his thanes, commonly citing our reputation for drunkenness and battle, celebration, mourning, diplomacy, and life in general, really. High King Ulrich, they told us, found a way to allay their concerns and prove our worthiness to them. We were to be given the grand and honourable duty of escorting his youngest daughter, Ulrica Kemnesdottir, from her task as a diplomatic envoy to Zufbar back home to Everpeak to celebrate the High King's 500th birthday. The announcement was met with near total universal cheering, and drinking, of course, by almost everyone assembled. For those in the know, you may have caught on and guessed that I was one of, if not the only dwarf not getting shit-faced in celebration. And this time, it's not because I'm a sourpuss, as my younger relatives so love to whisper behind my back. Because I knew how the story went. How in the canonical timeline Cairn Growlish, for whatever reason, fails this task, and because of that failure we are banished and rendered persona non grata by the rest of Imperial Dwarf Society, going from the cusp of entering nobility to disreputable pariahs whose story became a moral lesson about the dangers of excessive drinking in a society that greatly values alcohol and has a literal ancestor goddess dedicated to brewing. You know, I always enjoyed when writers post these little interesting narrative snippets, no more than 2 or 3 sentences long, of some event as part of their world building. A little hint, a tease about a wider world of stories never explored, and an impetus and resource for entrepreneuring GMs or hobbyists to develop their own tales and headcanons. Now that I'm one of the people being referenced in that snippet, completely unaware of the how but agonizingly prescient about the consequences of the what, I'm not feeling so hot about it. "Exciting news, eh, cousin?" Gimlin, my favourite cousin, asks as he sits down next to me. "Right, very exciting," I reply, my mind still reeling over the announcement and trying to sort through my feelings. "To think, nobility. Wonder who among our rowdy lot the Kvin will choose to wed, eh?" "You know how things go. Probably a well-to-do warrior, long flowing beard with the muscles of an auroch," I answer with a light casualness I don't really feel. "Aye, with a face full of wrinkles and breath that smells of pipe smoke and ale," Gimlin agrees with a smirk. Valia bless Gimlin. "Wonder if I can be part of the guard detail," I wonder aloud, causing my cousin to stare at me in open and definitely faux wonderment. "Fraternizing with your family, standing in spitting distance of nobility, duties beyond patrolling the mountains like a crazed lunatic, being near cousin Ochre for an extended period of time. Tell me who you are and what's befallen my cousin Norgrim." I glare at him. I wasn't that bad. Okay, I mostly wasn't that bad. The Ochre part was true, but that's because Ochre was a Wazok of the highest order, and that's not the point. This is important, Gemlin. Got a feeling about it. I want to do my part, even if it means enduring the fraternizing the nobility and Ochre too, I say, emphasizing that last part in particular. "Job's got you in a real tizzy then, eh?" Well, you figure you could ask your father. No doubt that Thang Grimbrew will assign him, and they're thick as thieves to boot, so if he asks, you're shoo-in." I consider his advice, grimacing at the realization that I'd be poking my father for help. I didn't hate him. My dwarf father, that is. Grim Thorgerson was an all-right dwarf, all told, but I didn't want to pester him over this. After spending so many decades in almost open defiance of his wishes, I still knew he helped me if I asked. That was a nice hoot of familial guilt I wasn't in the mood for. "That's a last resort," I finally decide. "Thane Grimbrew may not want us ranger near the princess, nor do I want to either, mind you, but I don't think he'd say no to having another pair of eyes acting as a scout for the convoy. Master Malachi will tear my ear off for going over him like this, but it's nothing I can't handle." "If you say so," Gimlin concedes, now looking at me with honest worry in his eyes. This was fine. Everything would be fine. Thane Grimbrew would see reason, and I wouldn't have to go to my old man for help. Getting Thane Grimbrew to agree to my request to join the scouts was surprisingly easy to achieve. Sadly, not because he found my idea sound, which he did, it just wasn't why he agreed, or my skills particularly impressive.
but because he saw an opportunity to help my father out by giving Grimm's boy the opportunity to put some honor onto his name and connect with the clan like the old man's been hoping I would start doing for a few decades now. Apparently, I'm a favorite topic of discussion, read grumbling, between the two of them when they kick back a few dozen pots at the end of every month, together with a few other friends of theirs. I chose to ignore the implications behind that for now, and put my focus on preparing for the trip. As one of the forward scouts tasked with scoping out the passes the clan would take to get to Zufbar and back, my part began early and ended later than the rest of the clan. Weeks, as the humans call them because dwarfs don't do that particular segment of time apparently, before the expedition, several other rangers and I left the safety of Karaza Karak early in the morning with as little gear on us as was practical. If you're interested to know what I carried, there isn't much to tell. While Clan Geralish is wealthy, I am less so. Not poor, mind you, but quality gear still costs a lot, and aside from the first set of tools we receive upon reaching 30, a dwarf is expected to pay their way for pretty much everything else. Of course, parents contributed to their children's starting funds, and expected that those kinsmen able to chip in if they're asked. But like I said, pride and guilt means it's usually a last resort. Most of the money my parents gave me upon reaching 30 was funneled into what I hoped were worthwhile investments, and what remained was spent on supplementing the free set of equipment I got upon reaching my majority in the form of extra ropes, better bags, and other such boring supplies. So in summary, nice gear and well-stocked for a 45-year-old dwarf, which was like a starving college student minus the starving part, and little else. Anyway, cue several more weeks of meticulously pathing trails, scouting terrain, and prepping safe drops and campsites for the rest of our less sneaky kin when they eventually arrived. Another one of the tasks we were given was in the dispatching of sneaky and perfidious gobbos, beasties, and other nonsense skulking about the mountains. But, given my youth, the elder rangers saw it fit for me to focus on the less dangerous parts rather than join them in actively hunting down potential threats. That suited me just fine, and I did my work without an ounce of complaint, something I've been told is a fine trait for a beardling to have by a few drunken uncles, but I'm pretty sure they just wanted to participate in the ancient culture and species-spanning tradition of hoisting off the boring and tedious parts of the job onto the new guy. To my great surprise, the journey to Zufbar passed by without incident. It was a hard but pleasant few weeks of tedium in the day, and evenings spent sitting by the campfire listening to my elders boast about all manner of things, from the number of gobbles and or other enemies they fought, the number of drinks they could chug, the difficulty of life when they were young, and the softness of us youths. You know, typical dwarf stuff. We didn't stay in Zufbar for long, merely coming in and restocking our supplies, getting a few souvenirs, then disappearing back into wilderness to prepare for the return leg, well ahead with the boisterous column of Dawi coming up behind us. Didn't even get to actually see the princess either. Minor, but possibly relevant aside, astrology here is real and it's a bitch. How do I know? I was born under what the humans call Voips the Faint, or as we dwarfs call it, Zaki Adum, the madman in the dark. Why is that relevant? Well, aside from being used as an explanation for my supposedly erratic and uncertain behavior according to my elders, I also blame it for the ill luck I've had in life. From the clan I was born to the mishap of 73, why I'm bound from 2 engineers' workshops, the current trajectory of my life, and why I organize my thoughts as if I'm speaking to another person. Sounds loopy, idiotic, and downright illogical? Well, consider this. Magic is real, and demons exist, and there are both flying and non-flying varieties of bird-lying in this world. The stars foretelling my future and aspects of my character and life are not high on the unbelievable list these days. So, I'm not at all surprised when the other shoe drops and a signal flare shot high into the sky from the south. The green coloration meaning one thing, and one thing only. Greenskins.